Market Trade, the NBA.com. This is John. This report is for the 15th of May. And, as we suspected, we were heading down here and we were looking like we potentially could get across, and pretty much happened right at the gap up. We knew immediately it had already crossed above at that particular point and took off from there as you had short covering going above the highs. Interestingly enough, we ended up with virtually created a chaos event because we went negative 0.2 from the positive number on the power momentum. That means that this close right here is going to become a pivot point to where no matter which direction we move from, we're going to come back to it. So that would be very interesting. Needless to say, well over the 28 now. We get up there in the 40s. This is what I was talking about, though. But you can see that red line rising quickly now towards the yellow. When we get the cross from there, that's going to be more significant for a pullback, and then we're going to be able to see the eventual breakdown with the overall setup. And like I said yesterday, it could take a week or two. Nothing you can do about that. Just pushed right back up to the top of the boat. Still, there's no shorts. I mean, it's just pretty consistent. This was just a massive influx of buyers. So where you hear all these people talking about short covering, it really just isn't happening. You'll know when it's short covering because we'll be in the 70+% range, and all of a sudden, you get a massive spike. This was just buyers to control, and you can see that from the white line they had been tapering off, and then boom, just decided to jump into it hard. So 1653 to the upside. Blew past even our upside projection, which is in the 40 range, way outside channels. I mean, it just went through all of it and went parabolic immediately from an extreme histogram standpoint. So we know that those levels are all going to get retraced here on the pullback for it, and more likely than not it's going to be a swift one. Now for those of you who have the ABM and are trading it intraday, you dipped below it a couple of times, finally closed right above it at the end, and that's typical on a gap and go day. What you'll get is the huge move up, everyone puts their stops real tight, and then it'll just dip enough to cover and try and take out those stops, and then it retraces all the way up, and a lot of people will start to short this beginning of a breakdown thinking it's going to go all the way, and then they get fooled at the very end of the day and it pops back up. It's sort of a classic play over the years that the pros do to most people who like to put stops in everything, and that's just the way they work it. Gold continued to go under a little bit of pressure. It's going to do that as far as the market being so positive, but gosh, we're really now, I don't know that we've been that oversold since we had this last pop right over here. So, the potential for it is there. We dipped below the red line, which is not great. In a positive push. The worst thing would be to just have it move across for a couple of days before it pops up. Going to be on the right side of that one. Speaking of on the right side of it, now we had bought our 35 puts here for USO, and I talked about if we got down to 33.50 we would want to buy, and so let's take a look at what we want to do. Make a simple setup here. So we have 4 35 puts. We paid $1.50 for them, so we just want to go ahead and sell half of them. So if we just go ahead and sell 2 of them on we'll go ahead and collect the return on that. And if we turn around, see if I can just refresh this, see here, we can turn around and buy 200 shares, 33.50 or less. And what does that do for us? Well, it creates what I call riskless setups, because then we're starting to see these buy fractals. If we get a buy setup and we're still down at the lower levels, we can turn around and sell a call on the shares that we own and then buy twice as many of those using those proceeds, particularly if we're expecting a strong move. But at least at a minimum, if we're wrong in any way, shape, or form, we always have that 35 put through June to sell as the top marker. We paid $1.50 for it, so buying it at 33.50, we effectively have created a zero risk setup for ourselves. If we felt that the shares were going to plummet, we could either just sell the shares at that particular point, whatever the difference is going to be, and there's just a whole host of little things that we're going to go ahead and play with on that and utilize it to our advantage. Now, for those that don't want to buy the shares, then certainly you could do the alternative, which would be to sell a lower strike put. And that would just be a matter of going to your option chain, selling, say, the 33 put for next week when Thursdays come out. And we'll take a look at those when that setup comes out, so that'll be interesting to look for. But clearly, we're getting into oversold territory, and the likelihood of a bounce increases on that. You may get one additional flush out. CLF, no shock. We were expecting, we're still expecting it to head down to the lows there, 21, 23. At which point we'll probably be turning around and selling additional puts from that one to enhance our position. Likewise, no shock with X having sold 20 calls. If we get a sign, maybe we get another day or so, we can get past Wednesday and get into Thursday of next week's options. Will definitely should be pretty close to getting attractive for selling additional puts on those positions. Like I said, WLT was trailing off. It's modest for the most part, just recouping the big blowout day, but again, not anywhere near being oversold like we're looking at with gold, where we've dipped down well below the zero line. Doesn't mean that we can't buy crossover. No, not at all. It just means when we're selling puts and we're looking to average our position down by keeping just the premium and not actually acquiring shares, we need to be more prudent about those entries. So they're a little bit more exacting. Facebook, we liked it from the dips that were going down. We knew it was finally getting to oversold. Now you've got the magenta all the way down to the zero level here at 0.12 and negative on the white. So any point that's about to pop, with an NBI, you had double fractal buy setups here with the orange dot. So, pretty straightforward with that. That's looks to be an attractive trade. So HLF was fading off. We had talked about raising our stops, doesn't quite get to them, and then boom, explodes again. Virtually creates another buy setup here. It's still extreme, but gosh, that orange dot target now 46.78 to the upside for that one. Not bad at all. BBRY, this is where we talked about the pump and dump, and it was funny because talking to a member who was talking about the chaos events and how he notices that price typically after it makes its move tends to revert right back to the close of those chaos events. So here, the chaos event started with BBRY at about this level, makes the move. We got very excited about the buy setups right here, and what did it do? Came all the way back to that continue. Now we created another one right here, and I told everyone, hey, very exciting, this is going to be a good pump, but I also said to you, hey, you gotta watch this one carefully and trail it tight, because as soon as that sell comes in, you are going to come back to, that's right, you guessed it, the same spot that the close was, 14.90 for the chaos event. And sure enough, what did it do? 14.92, 2 pennies in one day. That's not to say it's not going to do it the next day or so, whatever. But the point being, so many people get shocked by this, that this pump came and then boom, just fell apart. And that's exactly what these chaos events are designed to do. They're showing you that there's an imbalance in the activity and that it's going to respond in a extreme type of move. American Express, and it closed above our stop out level and then continued. So not ready to increase that one yet. You can see that give a buy signal there. So on the next sell, we would probably be moving up the stop effectively with that one. So all in all, kind of interesting from a daily standpoint. You can see that we ended up with the buy crossover back up above, and not uncommon when we get above this cyan and yellow point here. It just kind of floats up above. We're still seeing ascension from our white on the ERA, so no change with those. Also crazy as it is at this level, Starhawk again. Now we just had this one with a 70% win rate, and now we get another one from that particular standpoint. So it's extraordinary bullishness is the easiest way to describe it. Another one that was interesting that we had here was this LinkedIn, and what was particularly interesting about it was that it signaled the bifractals, kind of traded sideways, give a little bit of the chaos that we knew during the thing, but I said it was going to be explosive to the upside on a buy signal. Kind of did what we look for here when you get the white plateauing, and it sort of catches up to the magenta, and then boom, at the open today, it just, well, it was a buy crossover to start with, and then it just completely exploded all the way up to the upside target. So pretty crazy, but needless to say, effective. We had a similar setup with Amazon. A lot of people were dogging that one as well, and same kind of configuration, boom, and then blew past it. It wasn't a sell signal. Now you've put in a chaos event right here, so this close in particular is going to become the rallying point. So you pivot back up here. We're going to be looking for a point at which we'll get a sell signal that you would then say, okay, I've got to expect them to return right back to that level. And I think Amgen was another one that did well. We can look at that one. ANGN. It reached the targets that we had talked about the other day. And I'm very close to having that worksheet done that will list all the different stocks that you've been recommending, and we'll put them all in a little radar screen like this. And what it'll do when we get effective setups like one, the white reaching the 0 point, also the magenta matching it, we'll get them to trigger an alert that will pop up, and we can then go over them. And then on the website, I'll just have a single page, because when I'm traveling in the summer for months on end, you're going to want to have some of these nice picks, and that'll be fun. Now it's interesting that Amgen, after hitting the targets here, puts in a red dot short. Interestingly enough, and it's doing so though at a pivot point, so still within the buy configuration for now. It hasn't flipped it. Gosh, that is so low with the expanded ratio histogram. It's hard to see that white line down there, but it's dipped down quite a ways, negative 13.9, so it's right at the bottom configuration. And pop up there, that would carry this a lot further. So it would be interesting. I had a question about why I didn't show the setups here for the Power Mo 2 Opus that members with the indicators have, because not everybody has the indicators, number one. But number two, if you've got them, there's no reason not to take this. People were asking me, it's like, well, but the market's in a sell. Well, this is an intraday setup. So this can move up 10, 12, 15, 20 points. You get a pullback. It's going to set its own stop in there, and even if the market had reversed, this thing still would have closed out a positive upside trade. Now, I mean, this has been a ridiculous performer over the last many months, and we continue to keep showcasing it, but only 65% win rate, and we can see the graph right now is at new equity highs, and it's just been non-stop for the year. If we look at the periodic returns for the year so far, 5.12 profit factor, and if we look at the current trade, it's about 10 contracts for each of them, 16,000 currently, so it's going to put it huge for the month of May if that trade works out. Likewise, the 25K, I put it in a little bit earlier. It had gotten out over here, and it didn't take much before it popped back in, and that one 1640.75 as its target. What I've been working on is the conversion of the red dot ratio hawk, making the adjustments with the Power Mo crossovers. It does create a little bit later entries. There's still some more configurations I want to add into that setup. Also varying it from green and red trends so that we can utilize some of the different zones of the ERH as an addendum to it. It's just tough in this extraordinarily one-directional market. Everything's going just one way, and it makes it difficult to see a broader sense unless you look way back. So that's why I use daily or something like this, where I can go back and we can see choppy markets and things like that, and gauge, what the different effects are. And once I've converted into a strategy, we'll be able to go from there. But intraday, it's actually a little bit more effective than on the daily. On the daily, still maintaining our overall, red and green trend. With the MBI Opus, tends to be the most effective. Though I have been working on the one for daily chart. I'm not sure where I put that one. Oh, anyway, I'd have to find it. But it's been a process of going back through and marking each of the different buy crossovers for Power Mo on a daily, and that will be also an effective addition to our MBI Opus. Not that the MBI Opus needs any help, but it's always wonderful to have increased higher probability trades And then also knowing what those probabilities are, particularly when we move into some of these individual stocks and I'm giving you selections on them. I mean, they'll be highly effective and very profitable, particularly using options. I'm not a big fan of those guys that, brag, 300% return, this and that. It's only 300% return if you were investing the same amount of money you would have for the stock. So if you were buying, $100,000 worth of the stock, you would have had to buy $100,000 worth of the options for it to be equivalently the same thing. Otherwise, you could spend, buy one contract and have it move up a lot, and I got 1,000% return. No, because your account only moved up a few $100 relative to it. So always be cautious of that kind of hyperbole. It's just not relevant. Oh, I thought I would show Apple since it took such a beating. We described it intraday fairly effectively. I'll show you the 78-minute too. From a 78-minute standpoint, I mean, it went into sell mode back over here up at the peaks, which was still even below the 465 where originally we had called for a short setup. And we were looking for right around this 451 as a basing zone. And when that sort of hit today, we were still in sell mode, but the problem is that when you get your, this will be good for people who have the indicators, the ERH below this negative 13, usually when it pops back up, if it comes back below it, you're in for a pretty decent whipping to the downside. And that's exactly what happened. Now, that's not to say that this oversold that was about to get a buy signal wouldn't seem attractive, but more often than not, when it comes in, it usually gets sold off. And so people who are talking about their RSIs and some of those other things being oversold, divergent, whatever, I was laughing because this thing was not going to pop up intraday. And even for the 15-minute chart, you can see that was pretty clear because we had to dip below the red line. Now you're starting to match your lows on higher extreme. So very soon, like within as early as a day, this can become a very attractive trade to the upside. So definitely worth looking at, particularly since we knew that we had seen the orange dot setup coming in, but we just don't have a buy configuration, and nothing you could do about that. You just wait for it to turn around and hop in. But it was interesting because we had the cyan dip below the white and then come back above, and we know that's a bearish configuration, so it was enough to be pause hold. But what I like about this, and particularly if it starts the day, you'll hear me mention it. Won't make too big a deal, but the dip below the cyan, if we get it pop back up at the open with a modest move, that would become very attractive and set up equivalently what you would look for a catfish or even for a extreme fractal buy setup. So could be a good end of week play. We'll have to see how it plays out. As always, though, continue to look for me on StockTwits. Trade well.